critics, academics, reviewers tend to come up with these often inadequate labels like post-colonial, ethnic, Black British, British Asian, you name it. And I'm absolutely here with Bernadette Evaristo, who would say, well, Martin Amis, he doesn't get asked, well, are you a white English writer? So I just wonder whether those labels have trailed behind your writing on your tours during conversations, and what do you say to the people or the critics or the reviewers who tend to kind of narrow down your writing by using those labels?
So far, I don't meet, I mean, the media were very politically correct, so they would do the opposite. So you're free, you know, they would be so scared to say something incorrect, and I would really want to have incorrect questions.
I don't think you're reading the reviews of this.
Why we should care reviews so much? I mean, like, reality is strong enough. I wouldn't really care. I mean, if you live in Germany more than 7 years, and write in German, you're a German writer. And that's the normal way now, that whether you like or dislike, that's our life. We live everywhere, and your children will be living even more than that everywhere, because the exchange globally.
You know, the question of, you know, who is British, what is British, whatever. You know, it's a big conversation in Britain that is a political conversation, and it's going on in all kinds of ways. It's not something I feel particularly impinges on me. There are people who will say, though, you know, why should anyone talk about you as a Pakistani novelist? And I said, I have no problem being talked about as a Pakistani novelist, actually, because Pakistan is the subject I'm interested in. I would object if someone says we can only talk about you in that box, and therefore you and Xiaolu can't be talked about together because she's Chinese and you're Pakistani, or that you can't be talked together as British novelists because you're, you know, then it becomes a problem if it becomes a way of exclusion. But I think people can go too far in saying you shouldn't have any labels attached to you. Well, actually there are things that are really important in the writer you are, and the person you are, and what it is that interests you. And gender comes into that, and nation comes into that. And if you want to mention those things, I have no problem with you mentioning those things. But just don't only mention those things. Don't say, you know, we can only talk about you in this context and not in other contexts. So, I mean, it hasn't really come up, you know, there's some, you know, comments here and there about, you know, people wringing their hands about how many people on this list weren't, you know, of these shores for 20 generations. But I mean, we know that's a conversation that goes on in the country, so it's not a surprise if it's reflected.
Sorry, just looking around, there's a lot of young-ish students here who in various ways are aspiring writers, and I noticed you said you've taken 2 years off writing. But to youngsters who are going out into the world after they graduate, they have this horrible idea of having to earn money and make their way in the world. And I just wonder whether you could say something about how difficult that's been for you, or how you negotiate that kind of conflict between having to live in the world and earn money and do your writing.
Well, first of all, I didn't say I took 2 years off from writing. I said I took 2 years off from writing.
From writing novels,
Yeah, it was a different
so
thing.
it's you wrote other things that you were paid for.
Yeah, I did in the space where I did a long essay which Seagull Books published called Offence the Muslim Case, which was a long essay, and I did quite a lot of reviewing and short stories and all that. So I couldn't stop writing for 2 years. I mean, it would just be a weird thing to do. At the moment, I'm earning a living from writing, which is a very nice thing to be able to do. But again, it's not only novels, and I do other stuff here and there. There were a number of years in which I used to have a recurring position at a university in America where I'd go every third semester to teach. So I would earn money for that semester, and then I'd have a year off where I could write. I would also spend a lot of time in Pakistan where, because the exchange rate, the pound goes very, very far, which is also helpful. You know, I mean, really, and if you want to live in London as a young writer, well, good luck to you. How are you going to do that? You know, it was my 5th novel before I stopped doing the teaching and stopped doing the going to Pakistan for 6 months at a time.
And it's really tough, I think, especially for you try to publish the first and the second novel. It's, to live from them is really impossible. But then you have to take all the jobs which link to literature and writing, anything, journalism, teaching, anything kind of linked to that area.
Or not, I wonder though.
Or something else.
Because I think sometimes when I was teaching, I'd find it uses the same part of my brain as writing. So that I found it very hard to teach and write at the same time. And I thought maybe maybe my writing brain would be fresher if I was making shoes, although I don't know serving coffee or doing something that may be a different part of the brain.
So,
but I think the important thing is you don't start off as a writer with the expectation that this is going to be what you'll earn your living from day one. You're lucky if you'll ever get to do it, and it will still require you probably to do other things around it. You do it because there's some kind of compulsion or need in there, but and some people will find. Will find 2 hours a day, 3 hours a day, which they call, they manage to eke out and save that time for it. So it's not. It's not
sorry,
ever.
I didn't mean it to be an intrusive question.
No, it's not intrusive. It's just a fact. If you're going to be a writer, if you want to be a writer, if you feel the need to, then you feel the need to, you do it. But it's never going to be a stable income source.
Time for one more question? Actually, can somebody bring a little baby moon in while we have this last question? They've been out there for ages. Back? Oh, she's alright, that's fine. One more question at the back then, please.
Do you feel that the novel or novels of intellectual merit or worth are being kind of increasingly kind of relegated to small, more academic circles of readership, kind of like poetry? And if so, how do you feel about that as novelists?
well, I think it really depends what kind of writer you're asking. And I think everyone has a right to become his own writer. It could be a pure, the detective writer, or some writer are very difficult to read. Say if you want to be Proust type of writer, or James Joyce, or I kind of, because I don't have this appetite to digest another story, so I don't never really follow a TV series to find out who killed who in the end. I'm kind of really fascinated by the ideas and the experience, the different points of view. So that's my fascination. So the novel is only a vehicle serve those ideas for me, and then the linguistic adventures through second language or mixed language. So that is my passion, and so I was drawn to the writer who is interested in those areas, and maybe more like the horizon is vast in a way, in a linguistic or culture sense. I couldn't really stay with one very Victoria little story. The depths of that, because it's not my experience or passion. So, but then if you ask other writers, for example, I know a few Scandinavian writers, and they are opposite of my taste. They only write thriller, they only write crime novel. And I thought I would hate them because I never really liked that. Unless I go to cinema, I love to watch 2 hours crime story in the cinema. But to read it, I think I wasted my life on that. But then I really like them. So I like those Scandinavian writers who only focus on crime. Everyone has its own fascination and their freedom to do. You can't say, But in China we say, okay, China is a totalitarian society. The high literature is supposed to be this, that, poetry. I guess in the Western democratic society, you don't say something like that. You can read whatever. Some people only read the poem. It's their choice. Okay. Yeah.
I don't know that it's true that the novel with intellectual merit, which is quite a lot of novels, I don't think that's getting pushed into corner. I think what's happened is that that mass market fiction is now selling in larger numbers and in possible numbers. So people say things like, oh, but compared to 50 Shades of Grey, well, why? Why compared to 50 Shades of Grey? The fact is that books are, the kind of print runs you're getting for a lot of books are, and a lot of books of literary fiction, are very high compared to what they would have been 30, 40 years ago. It's just that, it's to do with commercialization and to do with all kinds of things, and royalties are down and profits are down and Amazon is selling for the year. So there's this whole other kind of conversation around consumerism and the way a book is sold. But you can still find a lot of people reading a lot of books of great intellectual worth. I think to say it's just being moved into academia and small presses, I don't think that's actually my experience of it. I think publishers are taking less risks now than ever. I think a publisher would much rather sell a book which they can hang some marketing thing on. So as Xiaolu said with the back of the book, to say, here's a book about, you know, Chinese student coming to the UK. This question of, you know, here's a blurb which will attract an audience is something that is becoming of interest. You know, when you hear editors everywhere say that, particularly if you know editors who've been around for a while, they'll say in the last 20 or 25 years, the marketing departments have taken on a much larger role in deciding what books should be published or not. You know, 25 years ago, the editor would decide. There was no question of anyone but the editor deciding. And now the marketing department come and say, yeah, it may be a wonderful book, but we won't be able to sell it. So that is certainly happening. But you are finding, but at the same time, I'll also say that there are really wonderful books being published with, you know, great serious things going on, which are really reaching people and which people are reading. Because I don't think we're actually becoming a world of morons. You know, I don't think we're becoming a world which doesn't take ideas seriously or doesn't want to think or doesn't think that narrative is a way to get ideas. I mean, I don't think we're in that state, although it's very easy sometimes to feel. I'm not saying that's what you said, but I think there's often this sort of despondent conversation around it as though this is what's happening. And if you actually look at the number of certain kinds of books that are being sold out there, and really good books, and you think, well, okay, there is an appetite. It's just a question of people knowing that these are the books they should go to.
It's a hopeful time for literature. Well, thank you so much for that, guys, and thank you all for your questions. Give you a round of applause for it. Released off to mince pies and mulled wine, I do have one announcement, which is from John Wright, who is going to chat to you about.
Thank you, Katie. I'll keep this really brief. It's my great pleasure to be able to announce the winners of the 2013 Literature Awards. Yeah, just to say, you know, I've been incredibly fortunate that we have such enthusiastic and dedicated community of scholars in our students here who have been working incredibly hard, and that we are kind of all pursuing this space of exploring writing and reading together. And evidence of that is that this room is so packed today as well. We have such an enthusiastic group. There are 8 prizes. Literary awards this year, and they're generously sponsored by the publishing houses Palgrave Macmillan and Myriad, and we do also have 2 named prizes, the Walker May Prize and the Peter James Literary Prize. To keep things moving and not to embarrass you, I won't ask all the winners to come up and collect these certificates that we have for you, but I will read out your names. So the winners this year, the Peter James Award for the highest Year 1 mark went to Jack Thurland. Hetty Clish won the Palgrave Award for English Literature, a second commendation. Emma Louise Day, also the Palgrave Award for English Literature. Ellie Exton, Palgrave Award for English Literature. Christian Galea won the Myriad Prize for Creative Writing. Joanne McCrombie, the Myriad Prize for Creative Writing. Joel Roberts, the Walker May Prize, and T.K. Mishi, the Peter James Award. So,
big round of applause. Big thank you to Myriad and Palgrave for being such generous sponsors as well, and obviously to Bloomsbury for their support for the centre this year. Thank you so much for coming tonight, to our authors and to our audience. We are now going to do a very quick Superman-style turnaround, where the mulled wine and mince pies are going to come in and the chairs are going to disappear miraculously. So if you guys stick around, there'll be drinks in 5 minutes.